So if she says she has the most empathy for herself, that's not empathy.
Hello. We are with, once again, our dear friend, Brianna Whitney with True Crime Arizona. And Brianna, you have now interviewed the woman that shall not be named, but I will say it one more time, Lauren Daybell, 3 times. This last time right before she was sentenced. And it is an interesting interview. Lucky for me, my co-host, who is to your other side, is Dr. John Matthias, a forensic, which is a criminal, and clinical psychologist. I get that mixed up a lot. Also my husband. Hello, dear. The house was a little messy when I returned, but we'll talk about that later. But thank you for keeping the dishes and laundry going. Hi. You did great. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, the house wasn't a total disaster, right? It was okay. It was okay.
I mean, there were a lot of Pokemon cards, cards scattered around, but we took care of this.
Yeah, that's true.
Nonetheless, back to Brianna. Brianna, we're so grateful that you'll spend some time with us because we watched this clip of your interview with Lauren. I had some interesting things that I noted from it. I would love to pick your brain about it. I'd love for us both to ask Dr. John some questions. This time was different. Tell us why it was different. Like you weren't in front of her. Why was that? Why were you on the phone with her?
Yeah, a lot of people have asked that question. So she had done one other interview after her convictions, and that reporter had brought M&Ms, and at that point, I don't know if he planned on giving them to her or not. She wanted them. She had requested them. They were on the table. Members of her team kind of tried to get them to her after the interview, and that was not approved by the jail. So it was considered jail contraband. So when that happened, kind of like an all hell broke loose type situation with getting in trouble, they took all other in-person interviews off the table, and they actually took her tablet away for about a month. So between that time, like right after that second conviction in Brandon Boudreaux's case, to up until Tuesday night, Wednesday, before the sentencing this past Friday, she has had no way to contact anybody. The only way I was in contact was through her team physically going to visit her at the jail. So I knew she was going to get her tablet back. At that point, the hope was to do a video interview. And that's how we started this interview. And she only had like 6 to 10 minutes of a free call. And then when I and other members of her team tried to put money onto her account to finish the video call, it wouldn't let us, which means that at some point the jail or the jail facility had blocked access for people to put funds into her account. We could put them into other people's. We could try, we were looking at that, what's going on. Never really got an answer as to why. It could just be that they were we're not letting people put money in your account. I don't know. And that's why we had to then finish on the phone, which was an access that we were able to get that way. So it was much different. And that's the backstory as to why.
Okay. And so it wasn't the M&Ms that were the issue. It was smuggling them in and how she did that with somebody else that was allegedly helping her. Because that's what I heard too, is that there was somebody else involved in that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And so putting money on the account is so that she could call you collect or whatever the case may be. Is that right?
Yeah, it's really weird with the jail system here. You have to put money onto certain things to be able to do certain aspects. So messaging, you can put money to message people, but that doesn't transfer over to video. And so, I mean, obviously people can put onto their accounts for commissary or whatever else. But for this, obviously, we weren't doing that. We were just trying to facilitate the rest of a video call. And that's what seemingly was blocked. We still just don't really know why.
Okay. And the reason, and I also want to ask you about this process of interviewing her. You've clearly interviewed her more than anybody else. Is she reaching out to you? Do you reach out to her? She clearly trusts you, or what is this? What is this relationship you two have going on?
Yeah. So unlike you, I have not reported on this case from start to finish. I did some. I jumped in probably around 2021, 2022. Is when I started doing more. We had other reporters that were working on it at the time. It kind of depended. COVID was obviously unfolding, and that changed a lot for us as news reporters. So I had not established as much of a rapport in this case specifically. I cover true crime a lot. That's all I do now, but I had to kind of build up a bit. So I'd only reported on this somewhat, but I had a pretty large portfolio of other true crime reporting, documentaries, other interviews, things like that. There was an attorney, a local attorney, who knew my body of work and emailed me. It was right after the Dateline interview with Keith Morrison. Emailed me and said, "Hi, I'm familiar with your work. Would you like to interview Lori Vallow Daybell?" And I thought it was spam. I was like, there's no way this is real. We're talking like Dateline's the only one that got her. I don't have that kind of notoriety. But I emailed back and I said, "Hi," and asked more questions. And she was very legit. So it turns out she worked with Lori's paralegal. And that is how I ended up getting that first interview, was because she just kind of looked at a totality. Here's somebody who we think would do an interview justice for X, Y, and Z reasons. And let's give it a go. And so because Lori had denied everybody interviews, the only way for me to then go back in and do it is if she put in what's called a tank order, or a tank order request, to say, I want to talk to Brianna Whitney whenever. And so she had to fill that out from the jail, and then they had to coordinate with the sheriff's office, who then had to coordinate with me. It is a lengthy process. It is not overnight. And it takes quite a bit of time. And then basically the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, MCSO, says, all right, you're scheduled at this time. You'll have 20 minutes. And this will be how it goes. And so that's how the first one started. I think once Lori felt that I at least would go in there, ask questions, and like show her some respect in the way of just letting her talk, I guess, somewhat. Then I think she's like, okay, I can express more. I want to share more of my thoughts. And that's how the second one came. And then it was always the plan to finish up after the last conviction before sentencing on this kind of like tie it up with a bow. What are your thoughts? And this was like something that was encouraged by some people. They wanted to hear a lot more from her. And then a lot of people also were like, why are you giving her a platform? And that was kind of a battling of thoughts that we heard through most of this process.
That makes sense. And as Judge Boreski said, and I've even stopped saying her name since saying it once. That's enough. Judge Boreski did say that she would fade into obscurity. And I did like that. But she did leave us, though, with some interesting things that she told you. So I did want to ask John about it. And that's where we'll turn to you, babe. You know,
well, before we get into the heart of this, I want to go back to the M&Ms quickly because you know, I'm trying to imagine, like, if somebody wanted, could you put a file in a pack of M&Ms, right? Or like a what was it they used in Shawshank, like a little pick, like,
I don't know.
Right? I don't like. It's interesting that I guess they consider everything to be contraband that's not approved. Right, that's the bottom line. And obviously she likes M&Ms, but like in terms of like the pragmatic impact of like having a pack of M&Ms, there's probably not a lot you can do with that, especially if the pack is sealed. Right, like you can't get a file in there. You know, maybe
you could.
I guess you could. Yeah, maybe.
And just the fact that she would take something in. I mean, did she hide it? I heard she hid it. That's what I've heard. It
was like the way that I think it was described to me, almost like a drug deal. Like, okay, we're gonna swindle you in this once it's in there. Okay. And part of the problem was when we first did our first interview, we went through security, like intense security. But after that, MCSO was like, we can trust them. So the second interview, we did not go through security. They saw our gear, they knew what we were bringing in. For that other interview, they also didn't go through security, and they would have caught that had they gone through security. So that also became like a jail process issue as well.
Yeah, there's and on that note, by the way, I'm not trying to be too humorous about it, but like when there's a lot of places where before I can enter, I'll need to declare every single thing. So I'll come in with, a laptop, a digital recorder, like different, testing materials. but I need to write out every single item on a list so that they can double check that I'm bringing that in. Like whatever they're approving, they need to see it. They need to categorize it. Right. I think people don't realize sometimes the level of scrutiny that people go through to get into these places. Right. And I mean, some of it depends on the facility. There are facilities here in Las Vegas that I've gone to a lot where, there's a certain level of trust at some point when you've gone someplace for years and they know you, like, they're like, just go ahead. Right. But, but before you get to that point, they're checking my briefcase or they're checking everything. And so I think there is like an inventory process.
Oh yeah. And so, just to even get into the security area, at least at this jail, at Estrella Jail, I describe it a lot as like the Tower of Terror ride at Disneyland and Disney World. You go into a room and then this sliding door shuts and you all just wait there for a second for another metal door to then open and go through. It's very odd.
Yeah.
That's a good description. I like that, Brianna.
That's how I thought of it every time.
Yeah. What I want to say again, it wasn't necessarily the M&Ms. It was the fact that she was sneaking something in that wasn't approved, which is really actually bad. And I actually think it goes against like some possible, like, I want to ask you, like, antisocial traits. Like, she knows the rules and she was hiding things somewhere without getting approval. That was the issue. And it is it says a lot about her, in my opinion. But
yeah, like the rule breaking is the most interesting part of that in terms of understanding her. And I mean, technically, you could fill a bag of M&Ms with drugs, right? Like anything. I mean, like the shape of an M&M is similar to a lot of pills that I'm sure a lot of prisoners would be happy to have. So there is a lot of potential pitfalls in what she did, in addition to the fact that she's like trying to skirt the rules, which is bad in and of itself. Rules. Yeah, the skirting of the rule, like. I think that's the most interesting part of that. Like, just thinking, I can get away with this. I can get around the rules, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
The takeaway I've seen too is like the rules, society's rules, Earth rules don't apply to her.
Right. Yeah.
That's exactly what this is. That's the tell, right? No rules apply to her. Even when she is in this very strict facility, and it's so clear, even for you, Brianna, that you have to follow these strict, rules, that she would then say, let me see what I can get away with. Yeah. All right, John.
I think that actually brings us into, because I agree, like this idea that there's, different planes of existence, right? There's the earth, and then there's the eternal plane. I think you Brianna, you uncovered something really interesting in this interview that unless we kind of pointed out, it wouldn't be super obvious, but you found something that no one else has found with Lori. And so most people are going to go, oh, you mean that she admitting that Alex Cox buried the kids? No, it was actually, so you asked this question about, I think it was fairly soon in the interview, but she says Alex buried the children, and she said no one killed them. She says she wasn't there, but then she says this part. I'm leaving a little bit out here, but mostly this is verbatim. She says, I found them afterwards, meaning the children. I found them afterwards. It was horrible. It was the worst thing that ever happened in my life. You can never be prepared to lose your children. So she said that, and I had to do a double take. I'm like, wait a minute. Wait, what? Like, number one, she's telling us that she was in the room with them when they were deceased. Like, I found them afterwards, right? So she was there. She's saying it was horrible, which she's never said before. It was the worst thing that ever happened in my life. You can never be prepared to lose your children. She's told us the complete opposite of that. She's always told us that she was prepared to lose them because they're preparing for this post-apocalyptic world, right? And now she's saying you can't prepare. And it was horrible. She's actually telling us here that she's, the way I read it, that she's experiencing some negative emotions, some sadness, maybe. I don't know. Like, it was horrible. It was the worst thing, right? But that's the exact opposite of what she said on the sentencing hearing day. She said, right? She said they're in heaven. It's busy. It's a happy place, right? Like the way she normally describes heaven, it's sort of like an eternal Disneyland, or, you know, like the happiest place on earth, or maybe better, like in Vegas, we have like the Four Seasons Hotel and Spa. It's sort of like the eternal Four Seasons Hotel and Spa. You know, you just like go to this happy place forever. Like, and her argument has always been that why wouldn't they want that? Like, to me, her argument has always been, it doesn't really matter how and why you're murdered. What matters is that you're going to this eternal happy place, right? And but what she told you, Brianna, was the exact opposite. This is the first time she's ever shown. So psychologists, this is kind of a Freudian thing. Freud talked about the mind being in conflict, that the mind was always kind of at war with itself, right? And there's been a lot of research, by the way, showing that seems to be the case, that the mind is kind of like this committee of different voices and, you know, roles and personalities, and this committee kind of fights all the time, right? There's like this constant conflict we have. And this is the only time she's ever said in any interview to anyone that there might be a slight amount of conflict over the murder of her kids. This is the only time I've ever seen that. And that to me was a brilliant moment, even though this is a short interview. Like, to get that out of her was really amazing. So good job.
Thank you.
Well, she also contradicted herself in the interview, didn't she? She said, at one moment, this is terrible. It was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And then she said, well, if people understood, they wouldn't even be worried. This is great. This is wonderful. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was an odd moment, I thought, as well. You know, she and this is something that hasn't been published yet, and it will be, but she goes on to tell me that she always knew that JJ and Tylee were going to have their lives cut short. That JJ, she knew this at the moment of adoption, that she had this premonition, and that Tylee, God spoke to her when Tylee was 12 and in the hospital for pancreatitis, and that she was going to die soon. And so that was weird too, because she's almost saying like, yeah, pre-Chad, this is what's going to happen, but we don't know when, and it'll be sad when it happens, but also they'll be in a better place. That's the kind of like back and forth that kept happening with her.
Yeah, right. And you mentioned it. She didn't say it. You mentioned it during your interview that she said that they fulfilled their missions, right, on Earth, meaning like their time was up, kind of what you just said.
Yeah, like they were always going to die young. They were here on this earth for this purpose, this time frame. They did what they needed to do, and now they're in this better place. Is kind of the vibe that I got from her, that she felt was her own reality.
But then,
it was the worst thing that ever happened. Okay, well, if you were prepared for it, and they fulfilled their missions, and they're going to this really happy place, which is what she's always said. Them, how could it have been the worst thing that ever happened? And right, like that's a total contradiction, and it shows. Possibly, people ask this question all the time, like, does this even bother her? Is there any conflict? Like, which is, you know, again, like the typical model of the mind is that human beings, we have different values and different goals, right? We have conflict all the time. And the more serious the matter is, sometimes the more serious that conflict can be. She doesn't seem to show any of that until this moment. I mean, it's really interesting. Maybe there is like a shred of conflict, or I don't want to say guilt. That might be going too far. Maybe guilt, but I mean,
Yeah, guilt's going too far. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Guilt's going too far. What are your thoughts, Brianna?
Yeah, I think guilt's also going too far.
Yeah.
You know, she then added further to me that she misses her children every day. She has pictures of them up in her cell. That's interesting.
Yeah.
You know,
True.
she made it a point to say she loves them so much. She knows they're happier, but that losing them, she was not prepared for. And I don't quite know what to make of that entire thing, because it did feel like a lot of contradiction back and forth. There's an interesting moment, and it's going to be in this True Crime Arizona podcast that we're releasing, but there is a moment when she is talking about loving her kids, and we get into this little back and forth of when I'm saying, well, people are so invested in this case because they're invested in your kids. And she's like, well, why are people so invested? And I said, well, these are children. They care about the children. And she goes, but people aren't going to care about my children more than I care about my own children. And I said, I would beg to differ on that a bit, because you've been convicted of killing your own children and being okay with that. And the rest of the world who's paying attention to what happened with them, everyone believes they should be alive, and they would be right now. And her response to me was like, well, I don't agree with that, and I don't appreciate that back and forth, Brianna, is basically what she said to me, like angry that I said people in the public care about her kids more than she does because she was willing to kill them.
Well, in fact, that's one of the reasons this case has sparked so much interest, because they want to know, why would a mother murder her kids? So, I mean, it shows.
Why do we have to care more than her? Lori, why do we have to care about your kids more than you? It's so clear we all do. So society had to care about them because you didn't, you know?
Right.
Total lack of self-awareness. Yeah, just unbelievable.
Yeah. And then she goes back to, well, Tylee killed JJ and then killed herself. And that's what perpetuates that whole mess of a lie. Yeah.
And then to blame the victim, it's so outrageous. I care about my children so much, I'm gonna make one of them I'm gonna blame one of them for this whole thing. It's just maddening.
Obviously the scope of this case too is the whole, who was deemed a light and dark spirit. It seemed everybody who was deemed a dark spirit died. And when I tried to ask her if she still believes in dark and light spirits, she was like, oh, well, it's not an easy answer. And I was like, well, care to elaborate on that? And she basically was like, it's not easy to explain. I would have to go into like a full religious explanation to, I don't think we have time for that, but it's not an easy. And I said, but this is a yes or no answer. And she said, it's not. So I don't know if I don't know exactly what she still believes on the whole light and dark spirit situation. She says that didn't happen at trial. I was like, well, it clearly did. At least we do know it. This was mentioned at every trial, but most recently in Charles' trial, we know that they believed that he was a dark spirit named Ned. But it was a bizarre answer there, where she wasn't really willing to give a yes or no, but that there was like more to it that all of us couldn't understand.
Yeah, like it seems like if you're not giving a hard no to that question, that doesn't seem like a gray area, right? Like after all she's been through, right? Like that, but it reinforces the point that she really hasn't learned anything. She hasn't changed. She hasn't learned, right? Nothing is different than before.
And interesting, because I did this interview on Wednesday and the sentencing was Friday, and I felt like she actually like used our interview as a practice a little bit for what she was going to say in court on Friday, specifically when it came to empathy. I very specifically asked her, about if she's going to have empathy for Charles and Brandon's families and the loss. And she's very specific to say, I actually probably have the most empathy because I've suffered these losses too. I mourn with them, these victims. And that was just so hard to comprehend, given that she's convicted of what she is. But she'll go down saying her and Chad Daybell were wrongfully convicted of everything.
So I guess she doesn't understand. So if she says she has the most empathy for herself, that's not empathy. Like clearly she doesn't, right? She doesn't understand empathy. Like empathy is by definition an emotion that's directed towards another human being. So what she's saying is she has pity for herself, I guess. She didn't say exactly what you just said in the like. So she told you. Could you reiterate what she just?
Yeah.
She
Yeah,
told
that was
you.
fascinating.
She
Yeah.
basically, so when I'm asking if she has empathy for these people,
Right.
she's saying, for the Woodcocks and everybody else, yes, I have empathy for them. I mourn with them. I mourn these losses as well. And then in her regard, she's basically saying, I might have more empathy than everybody else for them because I've suffered the loss of so many people. Like I've also suffered this loss. And I said, and in following up with that, I said, yeah, what do you make of this web of death that surrounds you, that follows you? And she goes, yeah, it's so tragic, right? And that's where you're like, oh my gosh, but you caused this, you're involved in this. And so she really made it as if like she too is mourning, she empathizes with those mourning these losses because she's also experiencing that loss as well.
Right, but so she's saying she does. I mean, she's in typical Lauren Daybell fashion. She's saying, "Yeah, I've got empathy for all these people's losses, but I've suffered more than them."
Right. Hence, I don't have empathy. This is about me.
Right.
That's what I caught too. That's
Right.
exactly what I'm gathering. I have empathy. I have more than anyone because I've lost
I've
the
suffered
most.
the
I'm like,
most.
that's not empathy. To say
Right.
I have more than anyone because I lost the most, that's selfish. She can't even like understand what empathy is. Empathy is about what they've lost.
Right.
And she's literally saying she has empathy because of what she's lost.
Like she really should have said, if she really wanted to be correct, she should have said, I relate to them or I understand.
Right.
But instead, I think she confused those. But the verbiage that she used in our interview, I feel like she almost copied and pasted into what she said in court on Friday. And when I talked to her, she was unsure if she was going to speak. Of course, I took away, I was like, of course she's going to talk. Like we know Lori, she loves the platform. And this was her last chance. So I wasn't surprised that she talked, but I don't want to say surprised, but just kind of like, huh, when I basically heard what she had told me. And I think like, I almost think that it gave her the idea in our interview to be like, maybe I should talk about empathy in her sentencing. And that was the only part you even heard in her statement on Friday that had anything to do with the victims and victims' family.
Yeah, it was like your dress rehearsal.
Basically.
Yeah. But the I suffer more than you thing is really her saying I'm the victim. It's her kind of getting into that victim mentality. Just to reiterate what she said, by the way, this isn't exact, but she said, I mourn with all of you. I feel it too. I acknowledge all of the pain. And this is the part that I talked about. She said, quote, if I was accountable for these crimes, I would acknowledge it. And I would let you know how sorry I was. I'm like, okay, like if she was accountable, but she wasn't accountable. She doesn't, right? So she doesn't have empathy because she's not accountable.
Right.
So I mean, it's a crazy statement.
Right. It's impossible to navigate live with Lori because it's so like this, and the contradictions are just constant, that to like try to keep moving forward but then press her on those things, it can be a really weird kind of line to navigate there because she's so irritating. I mean, like at the end of that interview, I literally got off the phone and was like, she's so frustrating. Like she is so frustrating, and you try so hard to try to keep that train moving, and it's like near impossible. I at least felt like I got more of a look into her and maybe a little bit more information, whether it's true or not. It was the most I had gotten from her, I think, since we first met. But it's really hard to feel like you could accomplish the goals of like truly learning more when you're dealing with somebody like that.
I did appreciate too how you got her so matter-of-factly to say, well, Alex buried them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a solid confession, because she's always saying nobody knows because you weren't there, and the evidence shows us that Alex was the one that did that. I've sat through every trial of hers and Chad Daybell's every day. And her whole thing, though, I just want to say about nobody knows because you weren't there. Well, the evidence showed us that Alex was the one that buried your children in Chad Daybell's yard. And so showing once again that we don't have to be there. We can figure this out. I did think that was good that she has implied that before, but she so openly stated that to you, which was interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah. Like everybody knows. Yeah, we do. You're right. Glad you can finally get behind it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I think when you expect someone to make sense, like in normal everyday life, we just expect people to make sense and be logical or somewhat logical, right? And when you're with someone who is clearly irrational, or they can't really articulate in a logical or at least a commonsensical fashion what they mean, I think oftentimes, to me, that indicates that there's some level of mental health problems. On the extreme end, it would be schizophrenia, but it could also be a lot of personality disorders kind of have their own logic, right? Their own kind of weird
fantasy.
Or inconsistent way, fantasy world that they create, and they don't deviate from that fantasy world.
Well, and I wanted to ask you, like, I had a couple questions for you just for like a while, but two main questions that are pervasive to me. One, do you think she truly believes all of this, or has she just gone with it? Like these religious beliefs and the delusion of whatever this web was. Do you think she really truly believes it, or no? And what would be a diagnosis for her of, like, I'm sure there's more than one, but like, what is the pervasive psychological diagnosis for Lori?
Two great questions.
Having watched her for years now, I think she definitely believes it. I don't think she could maintain this level of consistency with every interview she's done, right? Every statement she's given, it's always similar. I mean, you caught a little bit of this, like I said earlier, you kind of caught a little bit of this conflict that she has, I think, about how it was, she said, the worst thing that ever happened. I mean, that's interesting. Like maybe every now and then there's a little glimmer of, like, I don't want to say guilt, but there's a little glimmer of something, of like concern, maybe. I don't know what to call it with her.
You like sadness even?
I don't even know. Like, maybe, right? It's so hard to pinpoint. Like, for a normal person, we'd be like, yeah, maybe she feels sad, right? Maybe she feels some loss. But I don't know. I don't think she does. Like, she sees her kids up in, as she points out, like this really happy place. So it's so hard to describe, but I definitely think she's been completely consistent in terms of this belief system. So I think she does believe it. And then, in terms of like a diagnosis, a bunch of people have diagnosed her. So, I can't really do that since I haven't met with her. If I went in like you and, spent a few hours and did some testing and talked to her, I'd have a better sense. But people have diagnosed her with delusional disorder, and they've diagnosed her with different personality disorders. It's not like nobody's been exactly clear about the personality disorders, because I think there's probably multiple.
Yeah.
So whatever those are, they're probably in cluster B, which would be, histrionic personality disorder, or borderline personality disorder, or antisocial personality disorder.
I think antisocial.
Or narcissistic personality disorder. Those are the 4 personality disorder in cluster B. So I think we can safely say it's like one of those.
A couple, even possibly. Like, cluster B.
For sure. And that's what I thought too. And dealing with some
as someone that's not a psychologist, but I live with one. I get live with one. I think, right. So I'll chime in. I think it's antisocial. I think she's a psychopath. Just but I think there's more than just a diagnosis that you might be interested in, Brianna, because I've sat with Brianna outside and we've talked a lot and I've kind of heard your questions. I think the diagnosis isn't necessarily as, so you've got, let's say she's a psychopath, just for sake, okay? Not all psychopaths are serial killers like people think, you know,
Right.
she is one, but you know what I mean? It doesn't mean that she set out to be one. Because she would be more of a mission-driven serial killer.
Yeah.
But I think there's some things, John, that you say that do make it interesting to sort of make sense of this. So she's a mission-driven serial killer. And one thing, Brianna, that you asked once was, why would she give up this wonderful life, this handsome, wealthy man in a large house, if she's so materialistic, this happy, like all-American family, like the life everybody wants, for Chad Daybell in Rexburg, Idaho, without her children? And I think maybe that's a better question to ask John than even, because the diagnosis only takes us so far, but it's still, but why, right? Like you can have another psychopath who wouldn't do the same thing.
Right. Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. I would like to know more on that for sure.
Yeah. And so John can't easily diagnose on YouTube anyway, because he's never, he's a licensed psychologist, so he just can't do that. But I think there's a lot you can answer. Why would, if she is a psychopath and a mission-driven serial killer, why would she do this?
I mean, the simple answer is that Chad offered her more of what she was looking for than Charles.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, I think she felt with Chad, she could get some of those things, the same things, but Charles wasn't like elevating her to the level of goddess. Or that's what Chad was like, calling her a goddess. And like Chad's fantasy, Chad's fantasy was more compelling than Charles. Like Charles would go to church with her, but he wasn't like super crazy religious, right? He didn't have these extreme religious beliefs. So I think in that sense, Lori kind of felt like there was something lacking with Charles, even though they had this great life. And like, the kind of, if you think of the American dream as, a big house and like nice cars and stability. And I mean, and all that is really great, but for most people, but, Lori wanted more. Like Lori saw herself as like a spiritual warrior. That's her term, right? And so if you're going to be a spiritual warrior, like having the big house is not really what you want. What you want is to have the big house in, after the apocalypse, up with, Jesus, and like she
you
had
want
this
the
vision.
mansion, you want the McMansion white tent, you want the white tent McMansion, right? On the hill where the gatherers are. Sorry.
Well, not only do you want that, Chad fashioned himself as the god and her the goddess in the New Jerusalem. So like after the apocalypse, they pictured themselves kind of leading the whole thing. And then Jesus would come visit, he'd be their buddy, right? Like that was much more compelling to her than Charles, because Charles was sort of he seemed like the type of guy that go to church like every Sunday and then he just kind of put it away for the week, go do his job, right? Like, but with Chad, it was like an everyday obsession. And so I think that really appealed to her. She wanted someone that was much more invested in like the Mormon church and religion and than Charles was, I think.
I don't even know if it's the Mormon church, because I think that Charles was pretty devout, but the way you've explained it to me, John, is her ultimate goal was not that those earthly things. Her ultimate goal was that in heaven. The heaven mattered more to her than this time and now, the hereafter.
Well, she was very materialistic, but at some level, I think she'd always, Colby, told us repeatedly that she was always thinking of the afterlife, and she was always talking about mortality, right? Like, which is a weird thing with your kids. If you're, Colby said since he was really young, all his mom would do was talk about death, right? And when you're 3 years old, like you don't want to hear your parents, constantly drone on about how you're going to die. And so like that's a weird way to raise your kids with their entire lives ahead of them.
One of our earliest podcast episodes, our first season, Beyond the Veil. This was probably recorded in 2020, I think. So really earlier, maybe 2021. But a testimony, a speech of Lori came out at her friend Melanie Gibbs' home. And it's famous for her saying she has a murderous heart, or she doesn't have a murderous heart. But John noted something else in that testimony, which she said that the love of Jesus washing over her is a love unlike anything she has ever felt, that it is better than anything in this world, and all she wants is the love of Jesus, to have the love of Jesus wash over her. And John, you pointed out just how important that was, that explains who she is. And maybe that's a good way to explain this.
Well, and she also said something else fascinating in that same speech. She said that when you take in that love, or when you experience that love of Jesus, you stretch. This is the term she used. You stretch time. Mm-hmm. I thought that was fascinating. She said it multiple times. She reiterated that you stretch time. So time is eternal. It's endless. And I think that's really important to understand Lori, because that's part of it. Like, I think people forget, she's getting older. Her physical looks are like everyone's, over time, they were deteriorating. Like, she's going through, I think, probably a bit of a midlife crisis. She'd been married to a child for many years, and she's worried about her mortality. Like, as Colby pointed out, she's had this obsession with the apocalypse and death for years and years, since Colby was very young. And so I think she sees this as a way. Stretching time means you live forever.
Yeah,
in theory,
she talks
right?
a lot about eternal.
Yeah,
a word she uses a lot.
Exactly. And so I think part of this is related to that she's trying to figure out how to stretch time forever, endlessly, so that, so that her, her presence and her, her charm and her presence will go on forever, right? We don't want to do without that. So,
no, heaven above.
So do you think she would have had the propensity to do this with another influence if it wasn't Chad Daybell? Was this always going to be how she ended up, with someone other than Charles that would lead her to whatever this has become?
That's an interesting question. That's a really interesting
You
question.
asked her that, by the way. I noted that you asked her that, Brianna.
I don't think it would have been expressed in the same way. I think that the combination of Chad and Lori was really combustible. And in the end, because you got to remember, Chad's a big part of that equation.
Huge.
Chad doesn't want these kids around because he doesn't want to deal with them. Let's be honest. Like, he sees these kids as obstacles to his relationship with his goddess.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to spend time with them. He doesn't want to spend money on them. He doesn't want to invest in them, right? That's why they went to Hawaii without the kids. Like, talk about like self-serving and selfish. They're like, I don't want these nitpicking kids to bother me when I'm on the beach with you, right? Like, so part of this is definitely Chad, Chad entering the equation and not wanting to deal with her kids, not wanting to invest in her kids. And I think Chad actually makes the request, probably, to
Chad Daybell was stating, yes. Oh, sorry. That was important what you just said, and I interrupted you. Will you say that you believe that Chad Daybell...
He made the request to murder the children, and Lori complied, essentially, I think, is what happened.
I agree with that. I think it was Chad's decision. Chad Daybell, before he ever met Lori, was stating that Tammy Daybell was going to die young, and that he had a mission and he was going to lead, and the 144,000. And while Lori is a much more intriguing person to follow than Chad because she's a mother and she, as you point out, had everything going for her. She's much more intriguing, you know what I mean, to try to understand. But I think, as John said in our very first episode ever, in order to understand Lori, you have to understand Chad. And it's unfortunate that they met because, you know, they were a really, really bad pair. But Chad Daybell had these plans before he met her. And this was ultimately his belief system that he was sharing with her. And another thing John has pointed out too is, yeah, it was almost like he wanted to know that how far would this woman go for him? And clearly she would do anything.
Okay, confession time. I used to be that person, standing in the wine aisle at the grocery store, completely overwhelmed, picking bottles based on how pretty the label looked. Then I found Naked Wines, and now I get incredible bottles delivered straight to my door, and I actually look like I know what I'm doing. This podcast is sponsored by Naked Wines, a wine club that hooks you up with world-class wines from independent winemakers without the giant price tag. I recently opened a bottle of rosé from my last Naked Wines box, and it was chef's kiss. They cut out the middlemen, so you get amazing wine at up to 60% less than store prices. It's like insider access to the wine world, and yes, I'm now officially that friend who brings good wine to dinner parties now. Now is the time to join the Naked Wines community. Head to nakedwines.com/hidden. Click that enter voucher button and use my code HIDDEN for both the code and password. That gets you 6 bottles of wine for just $39.99, shipping included. That's $100 off your first order. Again, that's nakedwines.com/hidden and use code and password HIDDEN for 6 bottles of wine for $39.99. Cheers.
And what was your take then on why Lori and not Tammy?
Why Lori and not Tammy Daybell? I don't think Tammy Daybell. I think that I don't think Tammy Daybell was going for that. I don't think Tammy wasn't going to these preparing of people conferences. We also know that Chad Daybell was having affairs before he met Lori. Julie Rowe, he had past wives, or he was married to other women in past lives. This was not the first time he used that pickup line. He had pitched this idea to Julie Rowe that they would be the couple to lead the gatherers, and the 144. And so there, there's a lot of history with Chad doing this. And I think that to Chad, he felt like most people that head into affairs think their, spouse maybe is comfort and not, the goddess that he's destined to, head the 144,000 into the New Jerusalem way.
My personal opinion on Lori too is that she did not physically kill any of them. She just orchestrated it all. I'm curious if you both think that as well. And also, John, if based on her delusion and her thinking, if she had the physical capacity to kill her own kids and to kill multiple people in this, like to physically be the one to do it, could she have brought herself to that level?
Yeah, it's such a tough question. I don't think that she probably was involved in the actual murders, but I think she could be capable of it. I think she could have been, right? Like the manner of death, I don't know. Like do I see her shooting someone or stabbing someone? No, probably not. But
yeah,
can I see her like, strangling someone or suffocating someone or placing a bag over them or giving them pills, right? Poisoning them? Yes. Poisoning for sure.
that was one that I would have gone with if I thought if there was any way that she physically did it. For whatever reason, in my mind, poisoning would be like the way that I would think. I even have a hard time believing she would physically suffocate JJ, like, and put, like, I even have a hard time thinking she would be the one to do that, even though she's evil and all those things. For whatever reason in my mind, I like can't seem to equate those two into she did that.
The only way I could see that is if Chad really pressured her to do something, like to do it, to commit the actual murders, to prove her love to him or something like that, right? It would have to be
Yeah.
some type of peer pressure or some type of pressure from Chad to, like, because then I mean, that works for Chad at so many levels, right? Like, he basically has her like doing his bidding, and he's got that over her the rest of her life, right? Like, I mean, in Chad's mind's eye, like, I think he too thinks that, like, if he's not actually committing the murder, he's not doing it. He's not murdering anyone. I think they both think that, but I think for Chad, I think Chad feels like if he can get her to do it, then he knows for sure that she'll never leave him, right? Like, that's a commitment that, you know, that's a commitment that's hard to break, right? That's a bond that's hard to break. So if she was involved, I think it would involve something like that.
Interesting. Lauren, what's your take?
I don't think she did it, but I agree with John. She's capable of it. She's very capable of it. I don't believe she feels empathy. I don't believe she feels remorse. I don't believe she feels other people's pain. I think she's so self-centered, and I think she likes control over people. I think she likes orchestrating things. I think that she, I believe a lot that she, I believe that she made Tylee sick growing up. I believe that she is probably responsible for much of Tylee's pain. I think that she is very capable, which is why she said, sure, let's do this, Chad, whatever you say, because she's not the type of mother that would protect her children. So she's absolutely capable of that.
You think
act.
like Munchausen by proxy?
Mm-hmm. We have a whole video on why we think that, and we have some evidence that we lay out.
She tried to kill Larry Woodcock.
Yeah, we have that too. Larry telling us the story of having her fruit salad in Hawaii. That's what he meant when during his sentencing, when he said, you tried to kill me, Lori. He shared a story with only us, a hidden true crime, where he believes that Lori poisoned him with fruit salad and he almost died on an airplane after leaving Hawaii. Oh. She has poisoned Charles with Xanax, and multiple people have shared that she would give JJ Benadryl, as well as her stepchildren and others. There is a diagnosis of Munchausen by proxy when it comes to stepchildren, and a rash. So we lay out, in fact, we lay out all of the reasons we suspect Munchausen by proxy in a video, and I will send that to you. But
yes, please do.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, she's very capable.
It's so complicated. It's really hard to like fully understand, but when we kind of lay it out like this, it makes sense. I mean, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
But this is also the reason we can't stop talking about her, right? Because it's beyond human comprehension. It is so hard, and it's just like you want to make sense of it to help understand this world we live in. You can't fathom it, right? Which is why we've been talking about it for 6 years. But again, I love what Judge Bresky said. She will fade into obscurity. She will, but I think she will be talked about forever when it comes to the unthinkable and how she could commit such heinous acts and just stand by them or deny them. It's just.
Yeah, Judge, I'm gonna repeat the judge. This is what Judge Bresky said. He said the media requests will lessen over time, and you'll fade into obscurity. I think that's true.
She claims she's writing a book, and that she's gonna talk about it more there. But I mean, do you think she'll ever, even if she writes a book, do you think she'll even say, come to light on what really happened? I
No.
don't. Yeah.
No.
No.
It's gonna be more nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think she'll ever admit it either. Her entire belief system and what matters to her most, which is this eternal, immortal life, she cannot have it if she admits to any wrongdoing. It's gone.
Yeah, right. Because this was all for the better, and they're in a better place, and this is what had to happen. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, but as Judge Rusty also schooled her on her scriptures, he said, "Trust me, prisoners don't go free. It means you're gonna die behind bars."
Yeah, she's not going anywhere, but I'm happy at least to be done with her, as much as as a journalist and just as a person who is curious, wants to learn as much as possible. I'm so over it, and I'm so over trying to navigate those interviews with her, because it's not fun in that moment. It's tense, and I've learned as much as I think I'm possibly going to learn from her. And now I agree with Bresky, fade into obscurity, move forward. And that's kind of where I fall. I'm just happy to be done. I'm sure you guys are too. I mean, you guys have worked on this longer than I have. So
you've done an excellent job. John and I both think you've done an excellent job. As you said, you weren't expecting this chore to fall into your lap. But there are, as much as we want to say, look the other way, and we want to forget about her, we, like you, Brianna, are curious, and we want to understand, and we want to make sense of the unthinkable. And because if there is another Lori Vallow Daybell, which there was recently, if you could look at the Ruby Frankie Jody Hildebrandt case to say, look, here's another one. And it matters to try to understand. And so you took this unexpected responsibility well, and you did a good job. And I know that you have another podcast coming up about your interviews with her. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we're working on it. It's going to come out tomorrow. I host the True Crime Arizona podcast. That's our whole franchise on TV and on the podcast too. And so tomorrow we'll have most of our interview with Lori before the sentencing, and then we'll also go into what happened in sentencing, major moments from everybody who spoke at the sentencing hearing, and we just kind of finish it out with Kay and Jerry outside. And so it leads up, like, this podcast is great because you get like the days leading up, interviewing Lori, kind of knowing what she said going in, and then kind of my takeaway from everything that happened during the sentencing, and finishing out their story and finishing strong with those who were affected most. So I think it gives more insight for if people saw the interview, or the part of it at least that aired on television, this will be more of an opportunity to hear more of it kind of in that raw form.
Thank you. And by tomorrow, we might post this tonight. We might post this tomorrow. So tomorrow would be
Tuesday? Will be Tuesday. Yeah.
I've lost track of time.
Tuesday afternoon, evening is when this will come out. So True Crime Arizona, you can find it. And I guess after interviewing her 3 times, I feel like, in the words of Lori, I fulfilled my mission. Like, I did the best I could with the opportunity that was there, and I'm done.
Yeah, right. And Judge Bresky even said that, are you done? In fact, I have that. I got to show you my pin. I love that you just use the words "I'm done," because my pin fell off. But I have a Judge Bresky pin that says "Are you done?" And so we are done. We are done. But
that was my other favorite part too in the sentencing, when he's like, "Anything else?" And she's like, "Nope."
I'm good. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. So we will put a link to your podcast in the description of this video, as well as in pinned comments, or this episode. If you're listening on podcast form, we will have a link to Brianna's podcast as soon as this is up. And so it'll probably be coming out the day of this episode or the next day, depending when we post this. And if it's Tuesday, look for your podcast. And yeah, thank you. And where can people find it though? Just one more time.
Yeah, True Crime Arizona, Apple, Spotify, Google, really all of your classic platforms. You can find it to download. And also just want to say too, it's been just a joy to be able to meet you guys, Lauren, to spend time with you and Grayson behind the scenes, to get to know you guys through this. That's kind of a silver lining in these crazy trials, is like the people that you meet. And I appreciate all the work you guys have done on this case and have learned a lot from both of you as well. So I just want to say I appreciate it. And I love that we get to have a friendship now moving forward in this crazy industry as well.
Yeah. Crazy is the right word, but not
Yeah.
as crazy as you know who. All right.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Brianna. Have a
Thanks,
great
guys.
day, and we'll talk soon again. We'll see
Sounds
you.
good.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.